back to read more of the fantastic adventures of Captain Underpants, written by Dav Pilkey. Can you remember what had happened so far? I think the boys had got into really big trouble, hadn't they? And we were thinking about what might happen now they've been caught causing all their pranks. Shall we see? Chapter 7. A Little Blackmail. Mr Krupp sat back in his chair and chuckled to himself for a long, long time. Finally, George got up the courage to speak. "Well, what are you going to do with that tape?" he said. "I thought you'd never ask," laughed Principal Krupp. "I've thought long and hard about what to do with this tape," Mr Krupp said. "At first, I thought I'd send copies to your parents." The boys swallowed hard and sank deeply into their chairs. "Then I thought I might send a copy to the school board," Mr Krupp continued. "I could get you both expelled for this." Do you know what expelled means? It usually means that you'll have to leave school forever. The boys swallowed harder and sank deeper into their chairs. "Finally, I came to a decision," Mr Krupp concluded. "I think the football team would be very curious to find out who was responsible for yesterday's fiasco. I think I'll send a copy to them." George and Harold leaped out of their chairs and fell to their knees. "No!" cried George. "You can't do that. They'll kill us." "Yeah," begged Harold. "They'll kill us every day for the rest of our lives." Mr Krupp laughed and laughed. "Please have mercy," the boys cried. "We'll do anything." "Anything?" asked Principal Krupp with delight. He reached into his desk, pulled out a list of demands and tossed it at the boys. "If you don't want to be dead as long as you live, you'll follow these rules exactly." George and Harold carefully looked over the list. This is blackmail," said George. "Call it what you like," Principal Krupp snapped. "But if you two don't follow that list exactly, then this tape becomes the property of the Horwitz knuckleheads." Wow, look at that list. Lots and lots of things they need to do. Chapter 8. Crime and Punishment. At 6 o'clock the next morning, George and Harold dragged themselves out of bed, walked over to Mr Krupp's house and began washing his car. Then, while Harold scrubbed the tyres, George roamed around the yard pulling up all the weeds and nettles he could find. Afterwards, they cleaned the gutters and washed all the windows on Mr Krupp's house. At school, George and Harold sat straight, listened carefully and spoke only when spoken to. They didn't tell jokes, they didn't pull pranks, they didn't even smile. Their teacher kept pinching herself. "I just know this is a dream," she said. At lunch, the two boys vacuumed Mr Crump's office, shined his shoes and polished his desktop. At break, they clipped his fingernails and ironed his tie. Each spare moment in the boys' daily schedule was spent catering to Mr Crump's every whim. After school, George and Harold mowed Mr Krupp's lawn, tended his garden and began painting the front of his house. At sunset, Mr Krupp came outside and handed each boy a stack of books. "Gentlemen," he said, "I've asked your teachers to give you both extra homework. Now go home, study hard, and I'll see you back here at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We've got a busy day ahead." "Thank you, sir," moaned the two boys. George and Harold walked home dead tired. "Man, this was the worst day of my entire life," said George. "Don't worry," said Harold. "We only have to do this for 8 more years. Then we can move away to some far-off land where they'll never find us. Maybe Antarctica?" "I've got a better idea," said George. He took a piece of paper out of his pocket and handed it to Harold. It was an old magazine ad for the 3D Hypno Ring. "How's this going to help us?" said Harold. "All we got to do is hypnotise Mr Krupp," said George. "We'll make him give us the video and forget this whole mess ever happened." "That's a great idea," said Harold. "And the best part is we only have to wait 4 to 6 weeks for delivery." Chapter 9. 4 to 6 weeks later. After 4 to 6 weeks of back-baking slave labour, gruelling homework assignments and humiliating good behaviour at school, a package arrived in George's mailbox from the Little Wise Guy Novelty Company. It was the 3D Hypno Ring. "Hallelujah!" cried George. "It's everything I ever hoped for." Let me see, said Harold. "Don't look directly at it," warned George. "Don't want to get hypnotised, do you?" "Do you really think it'll work?" asked Harold. "Do you really think we can amaze our friends, control our enemies and take over the world, just like the ad says?" "It better work, or else we just wasted 4 whole bucks. Chapter 10. The 3D Hypno Ring. The next morning, George and Harold didn't arrive early at Mr Crupp's house to wash his car and reshingle his roof. In fact, they were even a little late getting to school. When they finally showed up, Mr Krupp was standing at the front door waiting for them, and boy was he angry. Mr Krupp escorted the boys into his office and slammed the door. "All right, where do you think you two were this morning?" he growled. "We wanted to come over to your house," said Harold, "but we were busy trying to figure out the secret of this ring." "What ring?" scrapped Mr Krupp. George held up his hand and showed the ring to Principal Krupp. "It's got one of those weird patterns on it," said Harold. "If you stare at it long enough, a picture appears." "Well, hold it still," snarled Mr Krupp. "I can't see the darn thing." "I have to move it back and forth," said George, "or else it won't work." Mr Krupp's eyes followed the ring back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. "You have to stare deeper into the ring," said Harold. "Deeper, deeper, deeper, deeper." "You are getting sleepy," said George. "Very sleepy." Mr Krupp's eyelids began to droop. "I'm so sleepy," he muttered. After a few minutes, Mr Krupp's eyes were closed tight and he began to snore. "Shh! You are under our spell," said George. "When I snap my fingers, you will obey my every command. Snap!" "I will obey," mumbled Mr Krupp. "All right," said George. "Have you still got that videotape of me and Harold?" "Yes," mumbled Mr Krupp. "Well, hand it over, bub," George instructed. Mr Krupp unlocked a large filing cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. He reached in and handed George the videotape. George stuffed it into his backpack. Harold took a different video out of his backpack and put it in the file cabinet. "What's that video?" asked George. "It's one of my sister's old Boomer the Purple Dragon sing-along videos." "Nice touch," said George. Okay, I'm going to stop there. What would you do if you managed to hypnotise one of your teachers? Would you make them do something really silly? What about if you hypnotised one of your mum or your dad? Oh, I don't know. I don't think I'd like it if you hypnotised me. What do you think the boys are going to make Mr Krupp do next? Have a think about it, and next week we'll find out more of the story. Okay, see you guys. Bye.